The Christmas holiday was always a time of joy in my family. My parents, staunch Christians and active members of the local church, insisted we all come together, no matter how busy life got. As the firstborn, I took pride in setting a good example for my younger siblings, particularly my brother, Chuka. Chuka, 2 years younger than me, was the golden child of the family. Tall, charming, and always full of energy, he was well loved in our church community. He led the youth choir, organized outreach programs, and was widely regarded as the perfect young man. My parents constantly held him up as a model for others, including me. But what happened that evening shattered every illusion I had about Chuka's carefully crafted image. It was the second day after Christmas. Our house was bustling with relatives, friends, and members of our church who had come to celebrate. Among them was Sister Ijeoma, one of the ushers from our church. Ijeoma was beautiful, with a soft-spoken demeanor that endeared her to everyone. My mother often said, "That girl is a good example of godliness. Chuka should marry someone like her." That evening, my parents were hosting a late meeting with some church elders, and I had stepped out to buy some snacks from a nearby shop. When I returned, I noticed that the house seemed unusually quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of voices coming from the parlor where the elders were gathered. I headed to my room, intending to drop the bag of snacks on my bed. But as I passed by Chuka's room, I heard muffled sounds, whispers, and what sounded like suppressed laughter. At first, I thought nothing of it. Chuka often spent time in his room, rehearsing songs or chatting with friends. But something about the sounds made me pause. They were strange, hurried, almost intimate. Curiosity got the better of me. I knocked lightly on the door. "Chuka." There was a sudden, awkward silence. Then, after a few seconds, his voice came, shaky and defensive. "What do you want?" I frowned. "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine." Something wasn't right. I tried the doorknob, and to my surprise, it wasn't locked. Before I could second-guess myself, I pushed the door open. What I saw froze me in place. There, on the bed, were Chuka and Sister Ijeoma. Both of them were scrambling to cover themselves with the bedsheet, their faces a mix of shock and embarrassment. Their clothes lay scattered on the floor, and it was painfully clear what had been happening just moments before. "I can explain," Chuka stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. But Ijeoma looked away, her face buried in her hands. I hissed, my voice rising despite myself. "Explain what, Chuka?" "That you, the so-called youth leader, have been sneaking around with an usher in our parents' house." Chuka got off the bed, hastily wrapping himself in the sheet. "Keep your voice down. Do you want everyone to hear?" "Maybe they should." I shot back, my anger boiling over. "You're supposed to be a role model, Chuka. Do you know how much trust people have in you?" "And you," I turned to Ijeoma, who flinched. "I thought you were a godly woman. How could you do this?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Sorry. Is that all you have to say?" Chuka grabbed my arm, pulling me out of the room and closing the door behind us. "Listen," he said, his voice pleading. "It's not what you think." I folded my arms, glaring at him. "Then what is it?" "Because it looked exactly like fornication to me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake. We've been talking for a while now, and tonight, one thing led to another. And you thought it was okay to do this under our parents' roof, while they're in the next room hosting church elders." "I know it was wrong," he said, his shoulders slumping. "But please, Ada, don't tell them. It will destroy everything. They'll never forgive me or Ijeoma." I stood there, torn. On one hand, I was furious at Chuka's hypocrisy. He had spent years preaching about purity and godliness, only to break the very principles he claimed to uphold. On the other hand, I knew the consequences of exposing him. My parents were strict, and a scandal like this would not only bring shame to our family but also ruin Ijioma's reputation. Please, Chuka said again, his eyes desperate. I'll fix this. I'll confess to God and make things right. Just don't tell anyone. After what felt like an eternity, I nodded reluctantly. Fine. But this ends now. If I catch you doing this again, I won't cover for you. I promise, he said quickly. The next day, Chuka avoided me, barely meeting my eyes during breakfast. Ijeoma left early, claiming she had an errand to run, and didn't return for the rest of the day. But the guilt weighed heavily on me. Every time my mother praised Chuka for being a shining example or spoke glowingly about Ijeoma, I felt like a co-conspirator in their deception. That Sunday, during the church service, Chuka led the youth choir in a powerful rendition of "Great is Thy Faithfulness." The congregation clapped and cheered, but all I could think about was the sin I had walked in on. A few weeks later, Chuka pulled me aside. I've been thinking about what happened, he said, his voice serious. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I need to take responsibility. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I'm going to step down from my position in the choir, he said. And I'll tell Pastor Emmanuel what happened, privately. Ijeoma and I have already decided to take a break from each other. We need time to reflect and seek God's guidance. I was surprised but impressed. It wasn't easy to admit wrongdoing, let alone take steps to make amends. That's a brave decision, Chuka, I said. I hope it brings you peace. It wasn't long before Chuka announced his decision to the church, though he didn't reveal the full reason behind it. He simply said he needed time to focus on his personal walk with God. While some people speculated, no one ever found out the truth. As for Ijeoma, she continued to serve as an usher but kept a low profile. Over time, the tension eased, and things slowly returned to normal. That incident taught me an important lesson: no one is perfect, no matter how righteous they appear. Even those who seem closest to God can falter, but what matters is how they handle their mistakes. Chuka's actions disappointed me, but his willingness to own up to them and seek redemption earned back my respect. And while I never looked at Ijeoma the same way again, I learned to let go of my judgment and focus on my own walk with God. To this day, only the three of us know what really happened that night. It remains a reminder that even in our weakest moments, there's always a chance to make things right.